Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about India's tourism sector. Now, tourism sector in India is a significant economic multiplier and is becoming increasingly important as the country strives for rapid economic growth and employment creation. Now, despite the tourism sector being severely affected by COVID, India witnessed a jump in foreign tourist arrivals in 2022. Now, the draft National Tourism Policy formulated by the Ministry of Tourism is a holistic framework for a sustainable and responsible growth of tourism sector in the country. The policy aims at improving a framework conditions for tourism development in the country and supporting tourism industries as well. India is also observing Visit India Year 2023 in order to develop tourism in mission mode and to accelerate India's rise towards world leadership in the tourism sector. The Ministry of Tourism is also organizing first Global Tourism Investor Summit in May this year to showcase investible projects and opportunities in tourism and hospitality sector in India to domestic and international investors as well. So today we'll take a stock of India's tourism sector, what is being done to promote tourism in India and how it is being implemented and what more requires to be done in various aspects. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. Subhash Goyal, who is joining us here in the studio, President of the Confederation of Tourism Professionals. Welcome, Mr. Goyal. We're also joined by two more panelists. Manjula Chaudhary is joining us. She's Professor of Tourism in Kurukshetra University and ex-director of the Indian Institute of Tourism and Travel Management. And Urmi Goswami, a senior journalist, is also with us. Welcome, both of you as well, to Sansad Television. I'll begin with you, Mr. Goyal. And let us first start by understanding the situation and status of India's tourism industry. Where do we stand today? And also, if you could make us understand in comparison to where we were pre-COVID levels and after COVID, how has been the growth in the tourism sector in India?
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your TV channel again. Well, in 2019, we had more than 11 million inbound tourists from abroad, and we earned $30 billion in foreign exchange as far as 2019 was concerned. And then during the two COVID years, you are right that in 2020, there has been some recovery, but we have still not reached the pre-COVID levels. To reach the pre-COVID levels, we need to do two or three things. One is that international scheduled flights at the same number have not restarted. A lot of flights have come in. It was a very good news that Air India is buying 470 new planes. Well, those will take another 2-3 years or 5 years to, join the services. But right now, the crisis is that the people who are dependent purely on foreign tourists, like the tourist guides, the small tourist operators or the small tour operators, they have still not recovered from the shocks of COVID-19. Although the government has come out with a new budget, and right in the beginning of the budget, the finance minister mentioned about tourism and the infrastructure that the government is building, new airports, new highways, new roadways, and this infrastructure is definitely going to help the tourism growth in the country. But as you see today, that airfares are very high. The airfare to New York or from New York or Toronto, which was in 2019 at 60 to 70,000 rupees, is today about 2 lakh rupees one way. So, there is a tremendous rise in the airfares. Similarly, the hotel rates, which were in 2019, 5 to 6,000 rupees, are nowhere less than 10 to 15,000 rupees in the same category of hotels.
Okay.
So, if we carry on like this, India is going to outprice itself from the neighboring countries like Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Thailand, Maldives, Mauritius, and all these other countries where the source markets, which is USA, Canada, Europe, tourists come from. So
Okay.
I think we need to put our act together.
Okay.
And as it is, we have not started aggressively our digital marketing and our aggressive marketing. And a lot of things need to be done.
Okay, we'll come to those aspects as well, Mr. Goyal, as to how to tackle these challenges and what needs to be done, because it looks like, that post-pandemic recovery, what you're saying is has been satisfactory, but there are still factors, there are still issues which needs to be dealt with. Urmi, I'd like to bring you in here. A draft national tourism policy, Visit India 2023 campaign, Tourism Investor Summit also planned in May. So, do you agree that a holistic approach is being applied to this sector, specifically given the fact that this was one of the hardest hits, one of the hardest hit by the COVID pandemic?
You know, what doesn't come across very clearly is which is the tourist that we are sort of aiming for. When you say visit India, are we only focusing on foreign tourists? And I think that if you really want a robust tourism sector, you need to cultivate your domestic tourists as well. And it basically starts with looking at very basic issues. When you are traveling somewhere, whether in your country or out to another country, what are you looking for? That it's safe, there are things to do, you have a decent place to stay, access is easy, you are able to communicate, there are basic services like health services in case you need them. And I think when we are saying holistic, you have to situate the tourism industry in the larger context as well. And are we developing our tourism sector in that fashion? And I'm not sure, whether that is happening. We talk about responsible tourism, we talk about sustainable tourism, but I'm not sure exactly where we are going with this.
Okay.
So there needs to be greater clarity on who you're trying to attract. And I think that if we start by looking at domestic tourists, if you're able to attract your domestic tourists, you'll realize that you are able to attract a whole lot of foreign tourists as well. And two is, are you being able to offer the basic things that any tourist is looking for, whether it's a domestic tourist or an international tourist, when they come visiting to a particular part of the world. The other thing is, in the Indian context, because we are such a vast and diverse country, there are many ways to slice the tourism sort of pie. You can think of ecotourism, and there you can go from the coastal regions to forest areas, to hills, desert and plains. I mean, there's just enough ways to slice it.
Indeed.
Food, another critical angle of the tourism sort of pie. How do you integrate all these things into what you're looking at as a tourism sector? And I'm not exactly sure how holistic the vision is within the policy that's being set up. So there's infrastructure, there's who you're trying to attract, there's what you're trying to attract them with, and where is the other basic things that you need to make a tourist feel welcome or want to. Why do you just suddenly pick up? I mean, you can throw the dart and decide I'm going to go there for a holiday, or you realize that, okay, this is something I want to see, and then I can do X, Y, and Z. How easy is it for me? You don't want a holiday to be taxing, right? So how are we working on that? So I think we need to sort of change our lens on holistic slightly, because there's a whole lot that's happening. And how do you integrate these various things into your...
So an integrated approach is what Urmi is advocating here. I'll bring in Professor Manjula Chaudhary also. Professor Chaudhary, you've been part of the industry, you've been training professionals as well. Now, tourism sector is not only, the source of livelihood for those who are directly, employed with the tourism industry, but also has an indirect impact on the economic aspect, economy of a lot of other people. That's why it's considered as a multiplier of economy, in terms of growth. That's one aspect. But when we're talking about what needs to be done, from your perspective, how should we adopt that holistic approach, the one which is being referred to by Urmi and was referred to by Mr. Goyal as well earlier, in terms of ensuring that all aspects are taken into consideration?
Well, I strongly feel that we have to look at the tourism from non-tourism perspective also. And tourism has to be part of the total development model. Well, right now, what are we doing whenever we are developing tourism policy, we are talking about tourism only. But look at the village and look at the city. If we think of tourism in village, we have to see like how much tourism has to be promoted in that village. It's not about tourism, it's development of village. Similarly, it's not about city, it is development of city. Similarly, for a state, it is development of state, not only tourism only. So we have to see how much tourism should be permissible in a particular area and how much economic development shall come from non-tourism dimensions. And this will require the more holistic approach, and any policy will be feel good, but then it has to be converted into concrete action plans, because tourism cannot be promoted is through the same policy in the same manner in every part of the country. And there's a very nice report from the Bloomberg which says tourism in India is booming, but why are we worried? And we are worried because we are missing on sustainability aspect, because the holistic dimension is not being taken care of when we think of the action level. Say for example, Joshimath, what is happening? So people are blaming tourism also apart from other development aspects, but most of the development tend to happen because of the tourism. So I think whenever we are thinking of any policy, it should not be only tourism policy, the overall development shall be taken care of.
Okay.
And that shall pave the way for more holistic framework, like this has been done in some of the island countries, some of the mountain destinations which are very, very fragile. India is very beautiful, vast places are available, like there is a vast landscape. But this is the limiting factor, because we are not planning at the micro level. And you see, in India, we still don't have this DMOs, Destination Management Organization. In the name of DMOs, we have central government like ministry, and then in the state we have departments of tourism. So there can be DMOs for cities, there can be DMOs for areas, so that a specific tourism planning can be then done for that particular area by including all the stakeholders in that particular area where development has to take place. So this is my take on like how we can make it holistic.
Okay, fair enough. Most of them are very pretty much relevant and important points there as well. Mr. Goyal, I'd like to bring you in back in, because in your first response you spoke about foreign tourist arrivals as well, how to attract more, the challenges out there. But as Urmi was pointing out, and as Professor Chaudhary is also referring to it, a major chunk and a very important, significant chunk is domestic, tourism also. And Prime Minister has in the past also exhorted the citizens to explore their own country more. In terms of giving a push to domestic tourism, what do you, as representative of the industry, would want the policymakers to do?
See, there has to be a different strategy for domestic tourism and this different strategy for attracting international tourists. There are two different strategies completely. Although as a product, yes, India is the same product. It's the same product for domestic tourists as well as international tourists. And as rightly said, we need an integrated approach, which is fine. But the strategy for attracting international tourists and domestic tourists has totally to be different.
Okay.
As it is, after COVID, there has been a boom of domestic tourism. More than 200 million people are traveling within the country, not just for tourism, for pilgrimage, for, VFR, visiting friends and relatives. So the entire, if you see the railways or the, places like hill stations, like Jammu and Kashmir for the first time was choked. The number of tourists who were there, mostly domestic tourists, have never been there ever since independence. So similarly, even Northeast, even if you see Shimla, Kullu, Manali, all these people, even the roads going to the hill stations were choked.
But that's creating another problem.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. One is we need to understand the carrying capacity of a particular destination. That has to be regulated. What is the carrying capacity? We don't have to overdo it. As far as domestic tourism is concerned, we don't need that much of promotion. If we do few things, that itself will promote domestic tourism. Like we were doing LTC earlier for government employees. So people from the north went to the south, south went to the east. So once we have that for even big public sector undertakings and private companies, I think that can take care of domestic tourism. If we give some incentives for MICE, which is meetings, incentives and conferences, that also if we give some incentive like we are giving to foreign conferences that are held in India, we can have a lot of mice. So domestic tourism is taking money from one pocket and putting it into the same pocket. So what the country needs,
more investment, more money comes in from
more
foreign
investment
tourism.
and more, foreign exchange, because our foreign exchange from services sector has gone down. And if we have to reach, if the country has to, we are very happy. The Prime Minister and the government is doing a great job in the economic growth of the country. The GDP is developing, and our growth is today at 6 to 7%. But if we play our cards well, then this country has the capacity of growing at even 10%. And even if we grow at 8, 9 or 10%, I mean, we have now beaten UK, but we have to beat Japan. But our main competition is with China. Now, a lot of incentives that were there earlier to the tour operators to attract foreign tourists have been withdrawn in this budget or are not there. For example, SEIS scheme, Services Export Incentive Scheme, that need to be reintroduced. Similarly, the tax on outbound tourism, because you just can't have inbound without outbound, because the airlines that will bring in passengers have to take out passengers also. Otherwise, they have to be, as it is, we don't have enough airlines coming into the country. And that is why the airfares, which were 50, 60,000 rupees, as I mentioned earlier, are today 2 lakh rupees one way. So there is a 300%. So it has become very difficult for foreign tourists to come in and even Indian tourists to go abroad because it is becoming prohibitive. On top of it, the TCS has been increased to 20% instead of 5%. So that is also going to be a barrier for the small and medium operator or the middle income groups to travel abroad. There, because people are going on honeymoon, people are going to see friends and relatives, people are going for treatment. So all these things. So this 20% should be on a high bracket package. So there are a lot of things that need to be done. But we are on the right track. We have a good tourism policy. But I will go a step further. It needs to be integrated with the aviation policy. Because how will the tourists come? If there are no air seats, then the vision of our Prime Minister will remain a dream. So we need to translate into reality.
So integration with other policies as well, make it more holistic, look at all aspects also. Foreign and domestic tourism will, of course, we have to dealt with their own specific needs. But one aspect, Urmi, which is a common factor for either we look at foreign tourists or domestic tourism or medical tourism or culinary tourism, whatever kind of tourism which we are looking at in this sector, is making it more sustainable. Sustainable tourism. How do we achieve that? How do we deal with these issues which, Mr. Goel was pointing out, and then it becomes an issue in terms of, packed hill stations, more than their capacity. Professor Chaudhary was also referring to. How do we ensure that the growth is sustainable as well?
Well, one of the things is that, what's happened with regard to tourism in India is that there have been some pockets of, which are your tourist destinations. And they get overdeveloped and overexploited because, as Professor Chaudhary said earlier, we look at tourism as the money spinner. And we don't look at it as an economic activity. And therefore, it has, as you mentioned earlier, multiplier effect. So the thing to do is that you look at develop many destinations. That's why I said you can dice the tourism pie in many ways. Have different kinds of, attraction that will get people, whether foreign or domestic, to move out of their homes, maybe get on a train or maybe get on a plane and come visit go to different parts of India. And for that, again, as Mr. Goel said, as Professor also said, that we need to look at the carrying capacity of a place. So when you start planning and when you say, okay, there is a sort of pilgrimage site here and people might come. Look at the Buddhist circuit, for instance. The Buddhist circuit is actually not an overburdened circuit in that sense because you haven't developed it properly. So when you don't develop it properly, you could have a condition of under visit or over visit like we have with the hill stations. So you need the right kind of planning. So that will involve what kind of buildings you set up. How do we need X amount of hotels? Okay, beyond this point, we cannot have hotels here. So can we develop a satellite area where somebody will have to travel from there to come to this main area to visit the places, but they would do it because probably the fare will be cheaper, the room rents will be cheaper. You need to sit down and plan. It just can't happen that we are going to develop and suddenly you'll have 10 hotels coming up and 10 will become 100. So that's a big problem. The other is, how do you improve connectivity? Are we again going to tell people, oh, go rent a car and then you can travel? That creates another problem. So when you're talking about holistic, it's not just about looking at tourism and the needs of the tourist per se, but also how it impacts the economy. Do we have, of the local economy, do we have those systems in place? Do we have the right kind of people? Everybody talks about tour guides, but the fact is, do we really have people who are trained, or are they just people who each one will tell you a different story? If you go and you pay an amount, and people just, if you're a foreign tourist, you think of it, you convert it in your own currency and it seems like a small amount, so you don't really worry so much. But if you were a domestic tourist, it would be a huge amount. Again, that tourism is an economic activity, but for the tourist, it's also an experience. Does that experience leave a good taste in the mouth? And I think when we're talking holistic, we should be looking at, as I said before, infrastructure, carrying capacity, safety, cleanliness, services provided, access. Then, of course, the manpower. Do we have the right kind of manpower? Do we have, again, then the wherewithal to attract the right kind of tourists for the right kind of things? And India is a huge country with a lot of attraction. You should be able to find a place for different kind of tourists.
Indeed.
It's just about how you sit down and plan. And you plan not just looking at tourism, but looking at every aspect that comes in. You'll have urban planning. You'll have the chambers of commerce of that particular town or city or region. You will have the government authorities. You'll have other stakeholders. How can we come together and create a condition where people will want to visit? Forget if the people is domestic.
So not only an integrated approach, Urmi, but also a planning at the micro level, as Professor Chaudhary was earlier pointing out. Professor Chaudhary, you earlier also referred to this aspect that we will have to be a little more meticulous in planning at the micro level, at the destination level as well. And it's just not, as Urmi is saying, it's just not about the tourism sector professionals or just about the tourists who are visiting, but also about the tourist destination as well. So how would you, quickly towards the end to sum it up, would advise in terms of ensuring, we're all pushing for a growth, we're all pushing for, a boost to the tourism sector as well, but how to make it more sustainable and more beneficial as well?
Well, we have to think differently. We have been planning tourism for the last so many years in the same manner, and we seem to be sticking to this boost tourism approach, like how to get more tourism. And we are having a large number of domestic tourism. We will get more foreign tourism also if we make the good efforts. It will be good for the industry, but then it will hurt the sustainability. So first is we have to go for value-based tourism rather than volume-based tourism. For that, we need to target, as Urmi said, we should know like who are our clients, who are our customers, who are the tourists whom we want to invite to India. So depending upon our objectives, we have to plan accordingly. Second thing is, like, we don't have real-time data collection about the destination regarding crowd management or any other thing. So unless we have the real-time data, such management or such planning would not be possible. Apart from this, we collect a lot of data through marketing research division of the Ministry of Tourism. States also do their chunk of this job, but then we don't do any objective outcome analysis. Like what was our objective when we started the planning for 1 or 2 years, and then outcome analysis, have we been able to achieve that or not? So this is not being done. Unless we do it, we will not be able to adopt any approach which can be sustainable. Apart from this, I think there is certain areas where we are completely lacking for sustainability, particularly the participation of the hosts and the local population in the tourism, because their participation and equal participation of the tourism industry, which is little more inclined towards profit. So it is the host population which can force tourists as well as industry for the sustainable behavior. And this I have seen when I have traveled to other countries, like they tend to advise you like what is to be done and what is not to be done.
Okay.
But in case of India, hosts are completely indifferent. So it's not about only training of manpower who is going to join the tourism industry or tourist guides. The local population also matters.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing that comes to my mind as an academicians in the university, since this government has come, we have been promoting this startup policy. We have a number of startups which are giving this visible and new solutions, but we don't have this startup concepts in tourism in the educational institutions. If a good amount of money is put into it and we encourage youngsters to come up with startups, then naturally we will have, I said in the beginning, we need to think differently.
Okay.
So we will have the different solutions by the young people where they can advise us like how the sustainability has to be maintained.
Okay.
And if we don't pave the new ways, we will again keep following the old ways, and which is
Indeed.
very unsustainable as I look at it in the
Indeed, we will have to think of new ways to tackle all these challenges there. Thank you so much, Professor Chaudhary, Ms. Urmi Goswami, and Mr. Goyal as well for joining us and sharing your valued inputs out there on what needs to be done to give a push to the tourism industry. Indeed, there are a lot of challenges, a lot positive have happened in the past 1 or 2 years after the pandemic, and tourism sector was one of the worst hit sectors during the COVID pandemic. But there still remains to be a lot of work which needs to be done through policy changes, through a lot of efforts which need to be taken by the tourism industry itself, and of course the general population, those who are going in as tourists and those who are there as hosts as well. We'll keep a close watch on this aspect and bring you detailed analysis on various other topics as well. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.